The 7 Levels of Psychopaths, explained.
Level 1. The inaccurate.
These characters are here not because they aren't dangerous or entertaining or badly written, but because they're fundamentally wrong about what psychopathy actually is. Norman Bates in Psycho and Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs are both entertaining and frightening while being extremely well written. But using the paper published by Dr. Samuel Leistet, we can confirm that these beloved characters are in fact inaccurate portrayals of psychopathy. Leistet and his team said that these characters don't quite fit the mold because in the case of Norman Bates, he is more psychotic rather than psychopathic, big distinction between the two. As for Hannibal Lecter, he is obscenely unrealistic and a caricature of a psychopath. This is because Hannibal accumulates many personal characteristics that are not generally found in everyday clinical practice. He's described as having exaggerated levels of intelligence, sophisticated manners and cunningness, sometimes up to superhuman levels. Real psychopaths aren't omniscient geniuses who can diagnose people by their perfume while being elite painters and musicians at the same time. Hannibal is an elite psychopath, Hollywood invention that is too perfect and too theatrical. To wrap this level up, in early Hollywood, filmmakers had no real understanding of psychopathy as a clinical condition. They conflated it with generic villainy, insanity, or just being really evil, such as Tommy Udo in Kiss of Death and Cody Jarrett in White Heat. These portrayals played into public misunderstanding that genre villains like gangsters, mad scientists, and slashers typified psychopathy. Clinical psychopathy is marked by a persistent lack of empathy, shallow emotions, impulsivity, and often a charming yet manipulative, calculating, and cold-hearted demeanor. Now, let's get into real portrayals of psychopaths, starting with
Level 2. The low functioning.
From a neurological standpoint, low-functioning psychopaths exhibit high testosterone combined with low serotonin levels, which creates impulsive and highly negative reactions. They struggle with emotional regulation, leading to explosive outbursts of anger, sudden bouts of depression, or rapid mood swings. Unlike their high-functioning counterparts, who plan carefully and maintain a facade, these individuals are marked by emotional volatility and impulsive, reactionary behavior. They are not smart enough to hide what they are. Annie Wilkes from Misery is a prime example, exhibiting features ranging from emotional lability to delusional attachment to a fictional character. Another example is Commodus from Gladiator. He is catastrophically low-functioning, petty, reactive, and driven entirely by a wounded ego. He can't manage his own emotional responses under pressure, such as when he murdered his own father in a fit of rage after learning he wouldn't inherit the throne, driven purely by jealousy and a pathological need for approval. Other low-functioning psychopaths would be Joseph from Creep, Franco Begbie from Trainspotting, and Tommy DeVito from Goodfellas. Remember the distinction: great character, bad clinical psychopath. Tommy DeVito is a great character, but he is a low-functioning psychopath. He exhibits extreme emotional dysregulation as shown when he murders Spider over a minor insult, demonstrating inability to modulate effective responses. These are high factor 2 traits such as impulsivity and aggression. As for Franco Begbie, he demonstrates poor behavioral controls and inability to maintain even criminal relationships due to unpredictable violent tendencies. Joseph is another that fits the mold of this level, as portrayed through his attempts at charm but failing. He also displays possible paraphilic disorders and cannot maintain convincing false self despite trying. Level 2 characters have the absence of empathy, the lack of remorse, the predatory instinct, but none of the intelligence, patience, or self-control that makes a psychopath genuinely dangerous. But if we up the levels of psychopathy, we get
Level 3. The Mako.
According to the Hervé classification system, macho psychopaths have the second highest overall PCLR score among all subtypes, meaning they're extremely dangerous. But here's what makes them distinct: they score low on the interpersonal factor, which is why they fall into level 3, as they have minimal charm and no smooth talking abilities. Unlike level 2's chaotic, uncontrolled violence, macho psychopaths use brutality systematically, such as orchestrating robberies, assaults, and territorial violence. Characters such as Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York, Colonel Nathan Jessup from A Few Good Men, and Nicky Santoro from Casino are macho psychopaths. Bill the Butcher perfectly embodies this tier. Classified as secondary macho, Bill controls the 5 points through sheer physical dominance and territorial brutality. He's intelligent enough to understand power dynamics, but his methods are medieval, ranging from public executions, gladiatorial combat, and donning visible scars as calling cards. Nicky Santoro from Casino is another primary macho psychopath in pure form. Joe Pesci's character operates through violence, intimidation, and terror. He demonstrates zero capacity for behavioral modulation and operates identically whether context requires subtlety or permits brutality, which reveals a pathological inability to calibrate force to strategic necessity. Where De Niro's character Ace maintains sophisticated false self integrating into legitimate business, Nicky cannot suppress core psychopathy even when he's at risk. What separates this level from others is that a macho psychopath is a subtype of antisocial personality disorder characterized by overt aggression, impulsivity, and a need for dominance, often using physical threats to intimidate. And before we move on, it would be a dream if you could help this channel reach 3,000 subscribers, and it's completely free. Thank you.
Level 4. The God Complex.
This tier represents psychopaths who've developed a grandiose delusional framework around their actions, a fusion of narcissistic personality traits with psychopathic core features. Clinical literature describes these individuals as high scoring on factor 1 traits such as interpersonal and affective combined with pathological grandiosity. Unlike level 3 macho psychopaths who use force pragmatically, God complex psychopaths have ideological conviction that they're entitled to determine who lives or dies or deserves wealth or poverty. Characters such as Dr. Jed Hill from Malice, Alonzo Harris from Training Day, James Bond from 007, and Gordon Gekko from Wall Street embody this level. Using Dr. Jed Hill as an example, he is the purest cinematic representation of this complex. During a deposition, he delivers the infamous monologue, "You ask me if I have a God complex. I am God. I decide who lives and who dies." I'm surprised I haven't seen a TikTok edit of that yet. James Bond represents another institutional God complex. He seduces, manipulates, and kills without remorse because the state has told him he's above conventional law. Unlike criminal psychopaths who fear consequences, Bond operates in a moral framework where his actions are pre-justified by national security. Finally, Gordon Gekko from Wall Street, one of my all-time favourite movie characters. Even the paper by Lightstead calls him, and I quote, "probably one of the most interesting, manipulative, psychopathic fictional characters to date." Classified as primary manipulative, Gekko doesn't have to physically threaten anyone. Greed is good becomes his philosophy, and he uses it to seduce young broker Bud into insider trading, corporate espionage, and betraying his own father. He studies Bud's ambition, his father issues, his desperate need for validation, then he crafts a persona, the successful father figure Bud wishes he had, and then weaponizes it. The paper highlights how he represents the rise of a successful psychopath, individuals who climb to the top of legitimate industries by exploiting the same traits that would make others criminals.
Level 5. The Manipulator.
According to the Hervey classification, manipulative psychopaths score high on interpersonal and affective factors while scoring lower on the lifestyle behavioral factor. This means they have the charm, the superficiality, and the emotional coldness of psychopathy, leaning less on confrontational violence. In a way, this makes them more dangerous and parasitic, which is why I placed them in level 5. Characters such as Aaron Stampler from Primal Fear, Esther from Orphan, Amy Dunn from Gone Girl, and Kevin from We Need to Talk About Kevin define this level. Kevin is more of an outlier on this level despite demonstrating textbook primary psychopathy. He also exhibits congenital etiology. This is defined as abnormalities, in this case psychopathy, present at birth resulting from genetic factors. Therefore, you could make a case for him being higher, but I will touch on later why I placed him in this level. Anyway, the film explicitly explores nature versus nurture and concludes he was born this way with no environmental trauma explaining his presentation. He scores high across all the Hervé factors. The first is interpersonal. This is demonstrated for his dual false selves, presented as a perfect son to his father, while systematically tormenting his mother through sophisticated manipulation from early childhood. The second is effective, through his complete empathy deficit observable from infancy as he unalives his sister's guinea pig, his father and sister, then executes a school massacre with zero emotional response or remorse. However, what prevents Kevin from reaching the absolute pinnacle is that the film still plays on certain stereotypes and cultural misnomers about psychopaths and teenage school shooters, adding theatrical elements that slightly compromise pure clinical accuracy. But now, when we raise the bar of psychopathy across each factor higher, we get
Level 6, the Puppet Master.
This is where psychopathy transcends individual manipulation and enters the realm of systemic control. They've climbed legitimate power structures, accumulated resources and loyalties, and positioned themselves where their decisions can affect thousands of lives. Lou Bloom is the perfect embodiment of this level. He manipulates everyone around him and positions himself as a pure parasitic corporate psychopath operating within capitalism's incentive structures. He displays high Factor 1 traits such as self-taught corporate vernacular, superficial charm mimicking business culture, and zero genuine affection beneath rehearsed speech patterns. According to Babiak's research, he demonstrates corporate psychopathic methodology. For example, he views employees as disposable assets, as evident when he lets Rick die to capture better footage and frames it as a business decision. Amon Goethe from Schindler's List is another example that shows how psychopathy can weaponize institutional power. Classified as primary classic idiopathic, Goethe is an SS officer who runs a particular type of camp. His high Factor 1 traits are shown when he maintains positional professionalism while simultaneously embezzling Reich resources and operating slave labor. His relationship with Helen, a Jewish maid, reveals classic psychopathic ambivalence. This is evident from his attraction to her while beating her because he's neurologically incapable of processing emotional connection as anything but dominant submission dynamic. Finally, Alex Delage from A Clockwork Orange sits on this level as a primary classic idiopathic psychopath. Alex achieves systemic influence through organizational leadership and ideological propagation. Alex demonstrates high interpersonal factor through charismatic leadership that maintains gang loyalty despite escalating brutality. The Ludovico technique scene reveals his psychopathy is so deeply embedded that behavioral conditioning fails. What elevates him to level 6 is that he doesn't operate alone. He's created a microsystem where psychopathic values become group culture, like the real case of Charles Manson. But now, let's move on to the cinematic peak of psychopathic portrayals with
Level 7, GOAT.
We've reached the pinnacle of a clinically perfect depiction of a psychopath. According to the Hervé classification system, the combination of primary with classic and idiopathic psychopaths have the highest overall PCLR scores and score high on all three factors. These are primary psychopaths who are born, not made. There's no childhood trauma to explain them and no environmental factors to blame. What elevates this level and separates them from the others is the combination of clinical accuracy, as I just mentioned, but equally as important, the performance and portrayal from the actor. They portray characteristics that forensic psychiatrists watch and recognize as matching real-world psychopaths they've evaluated in prisons and hospitals. Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men is what the paper calls a well-designed prototypical idiopathic primary psychopath. What this means is that unlike God-complex psychopaths who construct ideological frameworks, Chigurh offers no philosophy or superiority complex. There simply is nothing about him, from his background to his facial expressions. The paper compares Chigurh to Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman, a real-life contract killer who also killed without emotion. The other character that makes this level is Henry from Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, who is another clinically perfect depiction of a psychopath. Based on real serial killer Henry Lee Lucas, the film strips away every Hollywood convention. The paper highlights that the accuracies are depicted through his lack of insight, a powerful lack of empathy, emotional poverty, and well-illustrated failure to plan ahead. That last part is crucial. When watching the movie, we see Henry is disorganized, impulsive, and leaves bodies in plain sight. Despite this, he doesn't get caught because investigators are looking for motive, pattern, and meaning, and Henry has none of those. Clinical accuracy alone doesn't create unforgettable cinema. That requires actors who can embody that void. Javier Bardem and Michael Rooker deliver performances where the absence of emotion is clear and the empty stare communicates more than any dialogue could ever do. And remember, the team behind the paper watched 400 films and identified only a handful that achieved this balance. Level 7 is where psychiatry meets art, where diagnosis meets performance, and in my opinion, it's much more terrifying than any Hollywood caricature could ever be. And if you want to see the 7 levels of TV shows, check out this video here.